Hello and welcome back to Archaeology with Flint Dibble. We have here ArchaeoWolf, also known as Morgan Kinney. And while we get some people in the door, let's check out our intro music, the new song again. Okay, so
Nice.
yeah, that's my friend Hussein Ozturk. He's a fellow archaeologist, one of my dearest, oldest friends. He lives in Athens now, and he's an amazing musician as well.
Nice.
So he gave me his whole folder of music, and he's like, use whatever you want. I'm like, all right.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah. So we got Morgan Kinney here, ArchaeoWolf. You work for the National Forest Service, and so in the U.S. Since we have an international crowd here, and so our goal here is to talk about the kind of threats that our field and our discipline and our colleagues face from pseudoscientists and pseudoarchaeologists, because it's something. I don't know about you, at least in academia, we just try to kind of ignore this stuff and pretend it's like just fringe people talking shit when in fact it actually impacts our colleagues. What's it like from your perspective?
It's amazing to be out in the woods, come across somebody who is either looting an archaeological site or asking you what you're doing. I mean, I live in a part of the country that has a significantly high population of kooks and crazies in the woods, you know.
You mean tweakers?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I've got stories about that. But you get out there and you either meet up with people when you're on the ground, face to face with them, or you meet up with people that you work with. That this stuff kind of comes out when you're dealing with them in a professional capacity, and then you have to you have to push back. You have to say, no, this is not how this works, and this is actually, you can't use this justification that you have in your head to dictate how I'm doing my job, which keeps us in compliance with,
you mean like people you work with who are non-archaeologists?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But also, you get into a situation because, well, I'm a government worker, I'm automatically bad. I'm automatically the bad guy. So you have people who are they're looking for a fight when it comes to getting into a conflict with the government, or throwing their weight around. It's public land. I love that because we're having such a problem with our public land status stuff right now. But yeah, you'll have people who are like, well, this and this and this is true, and it's like, where'd you get that? And they tell me, and I go, no, and I give an explanation as to why, and it comes back with a fuck you, you're just a shill for the government. And it's like, you guys are in charge of the government. What are you complaining about? So yeah, it has been incredible. And I've worked with people who are like, they read one of the books, one of Hancock's books, so they watched Ancient Aliens or whatever, and they go and they learn, and they're actually interested in, okay. But then I have people who I'm sitting in a meeting with who bring this stuff up and then say stuff, and apologies ahead of time because this is kind of spicy. When the person leans across the table and goes, why do we have to worry about this road? There's no dead Indians up there.
Jesus Christ.
And there's an indigenous rep from the tribe sitting 4 people down from me, scribbling in his book because they don't want to be at this meeting about a road.
Yeah.
And then they hear this, and then it becomes, a government to government conversation between this person and this person's supervisors, because something like that is said. And they literally were like, they had this idea that because it was in a book or on social media or on television, it carries some sort of weight of integrity. And
Yeah.
I go, okay, fine. There's TV shows, Game of Thrones is a great example, that shows some pretty extreme stuff in respect to treatment of others, treatment of women, blah, 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 blah. It's like, does that have integrity, an example? And is that something you follow? Okay, so maybe not look at a documentary and go, oh, this has got to be gospel truth, you know?
Yeah,
So,
well, this is one of my big complaints is, I mean, it's one of my complaints even to my colleagues is like, look, people take this stuff as real, legit science, even though it's totally fake science. And like, you know, and it makes sense. Look, bookstores sell Hancock and other people's books in the archaeology section. You know, Netflix and IMDb, they all classify it as documentaries and docuseries, or even Amazon, they'll list Hancock's books as like a bestseller in archaeology. So how can somebody who doesn't have any experience or any formal training or any formal education know? They have the signposts that are there from legit, like these top corporations, make it seem, you know, real, and and it leads them down the wrong way, and it has a real impact, like you're saying, it has a real impact on public perception. And one of the things that I keep trying to harp on is it has a real impact on our colleagues, you know, the way that we get harassed and stuff like that. And so I thought maybe just to start off, we could go through, I'm not sure if you saw my latest video about Joe Rogan, and where I went through and I showed how he went for the first 5 episodes where he mentioned me after the debate. He praised me and he repeated things he'd learned from me. And then he had Hancock back on and he went full on slander mode. So I basically said, look, you know,
it's money.
You're bitching me out. I'm suffering from cancer here. And so he actually just apologized. So let's play a quick clip of what he said to me. And then I'll play the apology. And I want to see what your thoughts are on this.
People like Flint just out and out lie. It turned out he played fast and loose with the truth. This is another lie that Flint Dibble told. Flint was not being honest through a lot of these appearances, like Flint Dibble and Zahi. Their credibility erodes publicly in front of everyone's eyes. The Flint Dibble approach, that guy embodies what you don't like about academia. You see him physically, he embodies it. Like, it's like, that's what it is. It's these weak men, these weird, kind of bitchy, weak men. Sometimes.
So that is what he said about me, which is what prompted me to make that video. And it was like, and I literally heard that one about the physically embodies this weak, bitchy men, literally the day before I go in for a fucking infusion for my cancer.
Yeah.
Right. And so I filmed a scene from the hospital being like, fuck off, Joe Rogan.
I did see that.
Yeah.
He says that, and I have to laugh because how tall is Joe Rogan? You've seen him in person.
To be honest, I'm a short dude. He's about an inch or so taller than me.
Okay.
So everybody's like, if
I'm taller than him,
he's my height. Yeah.
By 6 inches and could fold him in half. I really want to know about this weak, bitchy man thing. As for him spouting off on anybody's integrity, I mean, you know where I remember him from is Fear Factor, the TV show where they made people sit in boxes of cockroaches and eat pig intestine and balut and all this stuff that was foreign and freaky. And it kind of that shock jock vibe, which cool, whatever. It got people entertained. But then COVID happens, and Joe Rogan is the kind of guy that makes the feed stores locally here lock up ivermectin horse dewormer so people just don't go grab it and suck it down because they think it's going to cure them of COVID, because they saw it on the Joe Rogan show.
Oh, yeah. And now because of Joe Rogan, I get people on social media saying ivermectin will cure my cancer. Like somebody told my brother that, like, seriously. And I was just like, no, I'll trust what the doctors are giving me, you know?
It's not even, it's not even the same. I mean, I don't know where they get that because it's not even the same argument. that he's pushing with ivermectin. You know, I'm sorry if you don't know that cancer or, you know, gout or whatever, any sort of other thing isn't related to something like COVID. It's just not going to work. It's not a cure-all. You know.
Yeah.
it's astounding to me. I mean, the thing I think we're always going to come back to that we do point out, and it'll come out with everybody else too, is there's dollar signs involved here.
Of
Drama,
course.
upset, you know, get it out there. And I mean, cute
Well,
puppies,
they
bring
friend.
in more views, but
oh,
at
we
the
got
same
the
time,
wolf there. We got the wolf.
Oh, we got one of the three. Yeah, the other two are laying
okay.
You know, you can't have a cute puppy in every episode, but you can have drama, and people love drama.
Of course. Of course. Now,
so,
that said, he saw my tweet calling him out because he follows me on Twitter. And so about 2 days ago, something like that, he just sent this apology. So let's listen to the apology.
Sometimes you say things because you're just talking, and then you realize, like, God, that other person's going to hear that. I did that recently, and I'd like to apologize to this guy. There's this guy named Flint Dibble, who's an archaeologist, and I said, he attacks other archaeologists like Graham Hancock, and he says some terrible things, but what I did was very counterproductive. What I said was, like, these weak, bitchy men, and I named him. I'm like, and then he tweeted about it. He said, I have stage 4 cancer, and I'm like, fucking forgot he had cancer. Oh. I didn't mean him physically. I meant his behavior, but it made me feel bad. So
well, the guy's got a bitch body that's willing to take over cancer.
I was wrong. What I said, I shouldn't have said. There's sometimes I say things and I just think I'm talking with friends, and I realize it's going to hurt someone's feelings on the other. And it's counterproductive. Like, I'm doing the exact thing I'm accusing him of doing. He's attacking other people. I'm attacking him. It's stupid.
And we can be funny with anything. You don't need to like.
But I wasn't even being funny. I was talking to an archaeologist. I just get I got angry at this process that sometimes like established archaeologists are attacking these people who have legitimate ideas. But I shouldn't have done it that way. Like when people talk shit about me, I'm like, I would do that. Like, what am I gonna do?
You're too famous to not. You can't get offended. You're so big at this point that it's just part of the territory.
But that's part of the problem with saying things like about that Flint Dibble guy. You don't think about it while you're saying it. Like you're saying it to millions of people.
Yeah.
It's like it's not just talking. You know, and you're like,
guy's dusting off a raptor bone, and you just see a tear hit it because he's listening to you in his headphones. That guy's a dumb idiot.
I genuinely felt bad.
My raptor bone.
But it's like, I actually didn't have a bad time talking to him. We had to confront him on this one thing because he accused Graham Hancock of being attached to white supremacy and this like weird thing about Atlantis. Like, wow, how does that have anything to, like? And he tried to deny it, and we pulled up the quote that he did
because Hancock says no blacks in Atlantis.
No, this is like this thing that these people do when they try to discredit things. Like certain academics will do, or they'll connect what you're doing to racism or homophobia. They'll just try to like virtue signal their way into a position where everything you're doing is wrong. And it's the thing about Atlantis is a weird one. It's like it's apparently at one point in time there was some white supremacist that like was pushing the theory of Atlantis being this great white race, but that's not what any of the people that are legitimately trying to research it.
So, did that sound like much of an apology?
No, that sounded like I'm going to say I'm sorry and then immediately, because that's what people are here for, is the words of I'm sorry, and then immediately go down a rabbit hole of as to why I can then dismiss it further down the line. First question.
Yeah,
first question. Other archaeologist?
So he called Hancock an archaeologist in that.
I know. And it's like, wait a second. Are you telling me that Joe Rogan, the guy who gets on stage in front of millions and millions of people with his podcast and all that stuff, doesn't know that the guest he has on all the time, who says in his own words, I am not an archaeologist. Is it that ivermectin? Does he have ivermectin?
Yeah. So
are the intestinal worms whispering him?
And then the other archaeologist that he was talking to was also not an archaeologist. It was Luke Caverns, who is he's an archaeology communicator who sometimes communicates legitimate archaeology and sometimes communicates some absolute hokey bullshit
I went back
archaeology.
And forth with him on TikTok.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. Yeah,
a while ago.
Yeah.
And he was like, and he flat said in the comments to me that he's not an archaeologist either.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know people who have their degrees in archaeology who do not serve in the field of archaeology. They are any number of other professions. Meanwhile, there are the people like us who got our degrees in archaeology, and we are practicing archaeologists. That's what we do. I don't think there's ever been a conversation between the people we know with their degrees who went into a different career field on whether or not they're archaeologists. They went, no, I got my degree in it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm a cop or a lawyer or a
pilot.
I
mean, what makes someone an archaeologist is being employed as an archaeologist or publishing peer-reviewed papers as an archaeologist or teaching archaeology. It's one of those kind of, or being a professional student in archaeology.
I mean, I've got my pilot's license.
You know,
I've got my pilot's license. I am not a professional pilot. I have my Sawyer certification. I'm not a tree feller or a saw operator. I have my red card for fire. I am not a firefighter. I can do those things. I have a skill set, but I am not those things. And to go, yeah. So you have Luke Caverns on, cool. I applied to be on the show.
Rogan's show. To debate Hancock.
To debate Hancock. I sent 2. I will admit that I sent one in saying, hey, I will totally go up toe to toe. And then I sent essentially the same one in that might have been a little bit stick with a fork because it was late at night and the Jameson was my friend. I don't, but either way, I'm just this peon on TikTok who, when I get around to it, when I'm feeling it, whatever, I do content. I posted 4 videos this morning, 3 videos. That's more videos than I posted the entire week.
Here, wait, we got a video of yours. So yeah, check out ArchaeoWolf on TikTok. And if you notice at the end of that apology, he brought up how I somehow brought up that Hancock believes that his civilization is white or whatnot. And Rogan is like, no, Hancock doesn't believe that. Well, let's see what Hancock believes about that. Yeah.
So happy birthday to me. This is the first comment I saw this morning before I had any coffee. And it's somebody, asking, when did Graham Hancock say his mother culture civilization was white? And I'm so glad that you asked, because Graham Hancock says this in his very first book, Fingerprints of the Gods, which was published in 1996. You, of course, know that because no doubt you've read the book. But lots of people who try to argue for Graham Hancock have never read any of his stuff. And for those of you who don't know, he makes the claim on page 52, and 54, and 55, and 56, and 59, and 73, and 105, and 107, 108, 109, as well as pages 165 and 262. It's on all of these pages that he makes some sort of claim or postulation relating to the white god hypothesis, which is the idea created by the colonial Spanish in the 1500s that some white person had to show up and give the indigenous peoples of Central and South America all of their technology and all of their civilization and all of their agriculture because brown non-Christian people can't come up with that stuff on their own. Nowhere in his books does it actually say that indigenous peoples in the Americas created their civilizations on their own, that they started off as little groups of hunter-gatherer peoples that gradually developed, just like every other civilization on the face of the planet. No, they had to be helped by some sort of globe-spanning, all-knowing, all-powerful mother culture that can only be described by a white guy showing up and helping everybody. Also, keep in mind, on page 11 of Fingerprints of the Gods, Graham Hancock goes into loving detail how he got all sorts of inspiration from Ignatius Donnelly, who was just a morally corrupt politician with racially driven ambitions in the 1880s, who wrote a ridiculous book saying that everything in the Americas was built by Atlantis, and all of the indigenous brown people moved in after the Great Flood because they obviously couldn't have done it themselves. So that's where Graham Hancock said that. In his own book. The book that, if he didn't write it, wouldn't have a trickle-down effect to a TV show that gets him a lot of money.
That is a brilliant one. I'm going to use that in the future. I promise you.
So here's a funny small world, small violin, playing the small world after all. I used to have drinks and dine with regularly the great-grand nephew of Ignatius Donnelly.
Oh, that's interesting.
And for the longest time, we would talk about it. And it was funny because there's this massive age differential between me and him. I mean, I'm in my 20s. He's in his late 50s, early 60s. He was a professor at the university. He was like, he's from South Dakota, but he has dual citizenship in Turkey. He was a war correspondent in Azerbaijan and stuff like that. He wrote a fantastic book called Assassinating Shakespeare, talking about how in the 70s he hitchhiked around Africa performing Shakespeare in the street. I mean, interesting guy. But we talk about Ignatius Donnelly, and he just carry on and on and on. And he has like an original of Donnelly's book about Sir Francis Bacon or Thomas Bacon, the Great Cryptogram, talking about how Shakespeare didn't write his stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what Ignatius Donnelly believed. Exactly.
And it's just hilarious because, you know, all the way down the line, he's like, yeah, that guy was an absolute kook. And it was actually Professor Goltz who said to me, his other book about Atlantis came out in 1882. What happens in 1882? And I think about it for a little bit, and it's relevant to what I do. I was like, oh, that's the technical end of the Indian Wars, where the U.S. military pushes all the indigenous tribes onto reservations. There's a conflict of interest there because they just, 20 years before, during the Civil War, they just spent how many thousands of lives freeing people of a different ethnicity from slavery, and now you're putting other people of a different ethnicity essentially onto, on their reservations by force, by murderous force.
Of course.
And then this guy comes out who's a politician, who has credibility because he's in power. He must be good. Writes this book essentially saying, oh, all of these people didn't do this. They just moved in. So we're not doing anything wrong by moving them off it. And it's
and this has a longer history too. The Indian Removal Act, in the statement that Andrew Jackson made to Congress, he cited the fact that the natives did not build the mounds. It was an earlier race that the native indigenous people had eradicated. And so that was used as justification to dispossess all of these indigenous groups. And the Spanish crown even used Atlantis and the myths of the Hesperides to claim land in Mesoamerica and South America. So, this goes back hundreds of years, kind of dispossession.
Now the Mormons kicked
and discredit
indigenous peoples out of Utah because they're the 13th tribe of Israel or whatever, all of that stuff. Yeah, the use of stories, whatever the origin of the story is, as a justification has been going on for a long time. Ignatius Donnelly, I find this hilarious, is the first person in all of history to officially cite Plato as a historic source. Up until that point, no one seemed to think Plato was actually recasting an account of something, of Atlantis. Or there was an understanding that he was inspired by things like Santorini or Helike, where the exact description of what happens to Atlantis happens to, the Minoan civilization, the city of Akhetiri, the city of Helike. And that back then when Plato was around, you explained it like, oh, the gods got angry because you don't know anything about the science. So, yeah, but it's Donnelly that cites him as a source, a historical source. So it's Donnelly's fault. Yeah. Have you seen a picture of Donnelly?
Oh yeah, he
looks like a mushroom. Yeah, he looks like a mushroom.
I mean, what I recommend everybody do is go read. Oh no, wrong thing.
Donnelly's book?
No, read Donnelly's book and then read Fingerprints of the Gods back to back. It is amazing. Why does this not show up? Yeah, it really is. It's just straight up plagiarism. Sorry, I'm having problems pulling this up.
Not an original thought, and it is definitely not a I had a vision.
There we go. Yeah. No, and because I did this the first time I read Fingerprints of the Gods, I started researching Atlantis because I'm writing a book on Atlantis and lost civilizations and all this kind of stuff. And I literally read just by coincidence, I read Ignatius Donnelly's Atlantis, and then the next thing I read was Hancock's Fingerprints of the Gods, and I was just like, oh my God. It's not plagiarism. That's too harsh of a term. But what it is it's the blueprint for it, you know. It's straight up. And then you can even take Donnelly's next book, Ragnarok, which is about a comet coming down and destroying this civilization, which he then applies now to, exactly, which he's also used with the Mayan apocalypse and with the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. It's really just a reboot is the way to go. And I mean, this is what we have to keep trying to share, is that this part of the reason this stuff is so wrong is because it's just an old idea that's already been disproven, that people don't realize has already been disproven by archaeologists, you know, in the past. And
you know, something I want to throw out there, because it needs to be said over and over and over and over again. I mean, it might need to be sizzled into somebody's hand with a brand. We in the field of archaeology, as much as we push back against stuff like Atlantis or the Stargate or aliens building the pyramids, do you understand that we would absolutely love to find that?
Of course.
We're not going to hide it.
Why would we hide something that we find? I love how people are like, no, it's because of tourism that they're covering up this super awesome earlier civilization. And it's like, don't you think if they put that on display, the tourist numbers would go even higher?
Because the tourists want to come. I mean, the tourists are there for ancient civilization stuff. Literally. Why would they not be? You know, they go to the museums for dinosaur stuff. Dinosaurs predate it, but if they didn't care about that, why would they go? So
exactly,
it is astounding, this idea that, you know, we don't do things that literally our career field does, and did all the way up to the point when Graham Hancock wrote his book and we said, no, that's not how this works. Show evidence. And that's the thing.
That's what we
said, show evidence. We didn't say, you're absolutely out of your mind. No, we said, show evidence. Let's discuss that. And he didn't want to play the game.
I agree. I think he obviously needs to show evidence. But that said, I think as public communicators, part of our job should be to show the evidence why this is also not real. You know, like talk about the choreography, talk about the evidence we do have, because I tend to think that if we just give the floor back to pseudoscientists, then we have to keep listening to their BS. When we should
I wasn't saying I wasn't saying give the floor back to him. I was saying if he wants to play the game, there's rules on this field here, you know. Show it. Yeah. Because you know, we have a standard of things. And one of the things you've seen him talk about, he talks about Clovis first all the time. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's that cave up in the Yukon, Bluefish Caves. Bluefish.
Yeah,
that has
smartphone. Yeah.
That has an incised horse jawbone, which dates back about 24,000 years. And when that came out, when that first discovery was made of this particular artifact that showed human activity, there was a lot of people that pushed back against it being so old. Now, keep in mind, these are the people that wrote their theses and did all their stuff with Clovis first being like the framework. Clovis first was a fine hypothesis for the time period. You know, it's just like the carburetor was a great idea, great bit of mechanic stuff for cars for a time period. Now it's better. Now it's been proved. So the hypothesis of Clovis first gets set up. It goes for a while. There's immediately stuff that starts pushing back against it. But in the 50s and 60s, you have the issues with, you know, the technology is not great or not available, or the methodology is still evolving, because like every other science, archaeology continues to evolve. Bluefish Caves gets presented, and a bunch of people say, hey, here are all the things that you need to account for that's not being accounted for. We literally can't agree with you or say, yes, 100% proof. It's we need more. And then early 90s come about, carbon-14, bang, proves it.
Yeah, it's all there.
Oh, look, the technology came up and was available.
And this is what healthy science should be. People come up with new ideas. Other people are supposed to push back and say, hey, are we sure about this? Make sure we prove this 100%. And what I find ridiculous is they keep talking about how like Jacques Cinq-Mars's career was ruined, or Tom Dillahay's career was ruined. Man, they had their full careers till they retired. Now, were there some assholes that were assholes to them? Yes, but there's
Every
people
day.
in the field that are assholes to me, and there's
Every
pseudo-archaeologists that are even bigger assholes to me. And it's like, and they keep talking about canceling them.
The greatest attraction from anybody, and regardless of your career field, or if you're a pseudoscientist or conspiracy theorist or whatever, is that we're all human and we're all nasty to each other.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a greatest example. Oh, by the way, I have to throw this in here because it happened yesterday. I went and had lunch with two colleagues of mine that I worked with at for the Department of the Interior a couple years ago, and we went and had lunch, caught up and everything. And what are you guys doing this weekend? Oh, one of them's moving. She's moving into a new house, and he's, my other colleague, he's going camping. And they're like, what are you doing? I was like, well, I'm going on a podcast with Flint Dibble tomorrow. And my friend about spit his pizza out because he's a huge a huge Flint Dibble fanboy. He loves you.
Cool.
So Drew, I had to tell the story. He's
what up, Drew?
Happy. and then my other friend Rebecca, she does not know who you are or any of the drama going on because she's just not paying attention to it. And we got about a 40-minute talk from Drew on your best friend and you, and how he went on a complete deep dive all winter long to get to the bottom of this, and he is a huge supporter of you, and Dan DeDunker can find a short period.
So I mean,
hilarious.
what I find funny is they constantly talk about how Jacques Dankmars's career was ruined, right? By people who wanted to get him fired, and they wrote letters to get him fired and shit like that. And Tom Dillahay, who, by the way, were never fired, who continued excavating and continued until they retired and everything. And then, Dan DeDunker, what he does is he tells his
right out the gate,
fans to do
forgive
this.
the quick rant. This is just going to be unpolished, basically me speaking my mind, because I kind of have to at this point, because right before I went to bed last night, and then again when I woke up this morning, I'd received more than one email that was a little disconcerting to me, so I'll just go ahead and say it right up the gate. Please do not try to get anyone, including Flint Dibble, fired using my videos, okay? Please don't send them to his employer. And this isn't some tongue-in-cheek thing. I mean it. Please, out of respect for me, even if you think that what I'm asking you to do is absurd, out of respect for me, please do not use my content to try to ruin this man's personal.
So that's how he started. But it gets worse. It gets worse.
Oh, God.
If we have it here. I'm not sure what
Hamburger, and I get my...
No, we don't have the right clip. Damn. He later on, we'll have to go see it somewhere else.
I'll find it.
I'll find it. It's on my Archaeology Wars video. He changed his tune. He no longer wants his fans. He still doesn't want his fans to get in touch with my employer. He wants them instead to get in touch with my students to tell them to get me fired. Yeah, and he goes to Mao's Cultural Revolution and tells them that is a motivator, because the Mao's Cultural Revolution armed the students and got them to attack the professors. So therefore, it's a time-honored tradition to get the students to go against the professors. That is that's them to do.
Yeah. I will say that 100%. I'm expecting either a call or a talk from somebody higher on the food chain than me at work.
Because you're here.
Because I'm here.
Yeah.
Because I know that somebody is going to go out of their way, because they don't like what I have to say, and do exactly what Dan told them not to, but then, of course, went back on. And I want to point out something here, too. I don't like Dan's stuff. I see what he says about you. I see what he says about all these others. The pretentiousness and the profanity is... I've known people that got flattened out in this parking lot for less.
Oh, yeah.
Is that he makes lots and lots and lots of content using all this fiery stuff. He's getting paid.
And he says that, too.
So
he said that recently.
He's getting paid to cause conflict he's getting money off of the drama and all this stuff. It's almost like he's being paid from high up to do stuff that disrupts things, because we get accused of being paid by, the Illuminati or whatever. Big Archaeology is paying us to hide secrets. I drive a 30-year-old Toyota. I'd like to know when my check is showing up. But I mean, there's a reason why there's a continuation on his stuff. I mean,
and he brags about it. He brags about it. I'm one of them stupid influencers. I babble about big rocks and bad scientists, and get paid for it. I'm pretty lucky.
I want to also say something to this. When's he going to get a real job?
Yeah, I think I don't think he wants one. I don't think.
Well, that's the caveat behind a lot of this is that when people like him push this stuff, or even people who just don't agree with it, whatever their reasons, whatever their politics. And I found this especially out when I had my government paid month-long vacation, thanks to this administration. Was so many people are like, get a real job. It's your fault. You should have thought better. You should have gotten a real job, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, one, what's a real job? And two, you better be telling that to people like Dan and Graham Hancock and all of these other people who do nothing but make content on the internet. Because last I checked, and if you talk to somebody like my dad, that's not a real job. Real job is picking up a chainsaw and going out cutting trees, or running a bulldozer, or fixing mechanics,
digging a trench,
farming, all of this real job stuff. Well, what's a real job? So, I mean, congratulations to him for finding that niche.
So my last personal interaction with Dan was about a year ago. He put out a tweet that said, he showed us a screenshot of a news article from the president of Dartmouth College apologizing for still having indigenous remains in their anthro department that should have been repatriated due to NAGPRA policies. Yeah. And then he said, Flint taught at Dartmouth College, or he thought I still taught there. I wasn't, but he said Flint is a teacher at Dartmouth College. He has probably handled these illegal indigenous remains. So a bunch of people on Twitter, I'd already blocked him on Twitter. A bunch of people said, look, Flint, A, is not in anthropology. He's in classics. He does Greek stuff. B, he does animal bones, not human bones. So this is ridiculous. So a week later, he put out a YouTube short saying the exact same thing. And I said, fuck it. I said, Dan, you have this completely wrong. I was hired by Dartmouth College for 1 year during COVID in 2020-21. And I taught entirely online. I've never even been there. I've never worked with indigenous remains of America at all. I've never touched any of them. And I said, this is bullshit. Take this down. And his reply was, thanks for this info, Flint. I'm just doing my job. And I'm like, so your job is to lie.
Yeah.
Is that's his job? His job is to be a.
When's he announcing his run for politics?
Yeah, exactly. And on that note, you were the one that turned me on to this. I did not know, because I've had it blocked on Twitter. He wrote a letter to President Trump and to Elon Musk. So you want to get into this for a second?
Oh yeah.
Let's do this. So
This is incredibly long. Like, I didn't know you could write something this long. For everybody who doesn't want to read this, it is 1,600 and change words. Because I couldn't screenshot it enough. I just copied it all into a Word document to see how long it was.
So let's check this out. Dear Trump and Musk, for Doge, science has long been one of the cornerstones of the advancement of society. Technological innovations are not the only reason why. Science has also better informed us of our place in the cosmos. So when I noticed a well-respected body of scientists that is clearly corrupted by political influences, but also uses millions in government funds every year, as well as holding an advisory role to the federal government, I felt it was my civic duty to speak up. Sadly, in recent years, many of the U.S. scientific bodies have become infiltrated by political ideology. As individual Americans, the scientists that make up these groups have every right to hold political beliefs. But when these beliefs become mingled with their work as scientists, they cease to operate as scientists and become politically motivated. The scientific method goes to great lengths to remove bias and individual flaws from the final findings. I mean, I don't know what the hell any of this is about, but let's try to move on a little bit. So a disturbing example of this is the present behavior of the Society for American Archaeology. Founded in 1934, the SAAs originally claimed to be concerned with educating the public on proper archaeological methodology and assisting interested amateurs when they asked for help. Today, however, it has morphed into a body of scientists who often make political statements under the flag of the SAA. I don't even tell people who to vote for or anything like that, but whatever. For more than 3 decades now, their political bias has been apparent in their writings and words spoken to Congress and Senate. But in the last few years, this bias has become extreme. Most egregiously, on November 30th of 2022, the SAAs wrote an open letter to Netflix demanding a documentary TV series be reclassified as science fiction. Which, by the way, let me just make that really clear. Asking Netflix to reclassify a TV show is not a political act.
Not in the slightest.
Not even in the slightest. But whatever. The series Ancient Apocalypse by British author Graham Hancock is certainly not what we call mainstream archaeology. But that's not why I write you, President Trump. I write because statements are made in the SAA open letter that are clearly not scientific, but that are nonetheless portrayed as part of a reason a scientific body takes issues with the Netflix series. The SAA open letter contains this particularly insidious statement about the series. The theory it presents has a long-standing association with racist white supremacist ideologies, does injustice to indigenous people, and emboldens extremists. I'd say we already proved that statement is true earlier in this stream, in fact. Your TikTok video and some of the discussions of Ignatius Donnelly. This statement is only valid if one disregards the fact that the people the SAA attributes the racism to lived in the 19th century. Though, as we pointed out, Graham Hancock's book also mentions
can't be
white
racist
people.
in the 2000s? What?
I guess not. In fact, in the 19th century, most archaeologists would be racist as well. I'll agree with Dan on that. Yeah. And in order to give its argument more teeth, the SAA drives home its point with an open lie. The assertions Hancock makes have a history of promoting dangerous racist thinking. His claim for an advanced global civilization that existed during the Ice Age and was destroyed by comets is not new. This theory has been presented, debated, and refuted for at least 140 years. It dates to the publication of Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, 1882, and Ragnarok, the Age of Ice and Gravel, 1883, by Minnesota Congressman Ignatius Donnelly. This theory steals credit for indigenous accomplishments from indigenous peoples and reinforces white supremacy. From Donnelly to Hancock, proponents of this theory have suggested that white survivors of this ancient civilization were responsible for the cultural heritage of indigenous people in the Americas and around the world. So much of this statement, according to Dan, is either inaccurate or is misleading to such a degree that it cannot all be covered here. Suffice to say, Donnelly was not the person to start the theory of an advanced global civilization in prehistory, which is true. He was not. Hancock does not believe this lost civilization was white. Well, you collected all the citations that show that he did think that.
In the first book.
Think that. Yeah. He also mentions it in Magicians of the Gods, by the way. He has 2 references to white people coming to indigenous Americas. And Donnelly was, in fact, an abolitionist, but these facts do not matter to the SAA when making its case. The individuals who claim to have been part of the letter's writing have been informed this letter has issues. They do not care. The fact of the matter is this letter contains falsehoods and scientists, blah, 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 blah. Oh my God, this just goes on.
It goes on and on. One of the things I want to point out about political stuff, the SAAs have written a letter and they've done a bunch of work bringing something to the forefront and educating people on this place called Oak Flats.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Oak Flats. Oak Flats is a very sacred indigenous site down in New Mexico that is on federal land. And the Supreme Court, under this administration, has used their political nous to push through the lease to a Chinese copper mining company that is going to obliterate the site. It's the same company that obliterated the site in Australia. That was, 45,000 years old or something like that. And that's the kind of political advising and whatever he's squeaking about that the SAAs does.
Yeah.
Pointing this out.
is
and
pointing out that this kind
guaranteed.
of stuff is ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the thing that comes back to it being racially driven, culturally insensitive, etc., and so forth, is because people arguing for something like this or dismissing it as woke literally say in their comments to me, in posts that I've seen in person, the Indians lost, so why should we care?
Oh yeah.
Or
And
we've delivered this country from savagery. Why do we care?
or
So-
stuff like this. Here's another one that I've pulled up. Oh wait, no. Why can't I find it? Whatever. I'll just read it to you. Good point. Half of the architecture thought to be Aztec is really much older. They were human sacrificing cannibals squatting in the ruins of a once great ancient civilization. This is what people on the internet are saying all the time.
Quick
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Celtic peoples had pickled heads, used to dip them in tree pitch. This is recorded as a spectacle of savagery by some guy named Tacitus, the Roman. The idea of humans. What do you think the Colosseum was?
Yeah.
It was a Sunday
human
picnic,
sacrifice.
but human sacrifices to keep the population entertained.
Mhm.
Human
And
sacrifice is
literally just tying them up and killing them. Most of the gladiators didn't die. Most of the gladiators were expertly trained investments as athletes. The people that died were tied up and just killed for lunch day crowds. Throats cut.
So you have humans being horrible to humans is a thing that's all around the world. To focus on the specific group doing a specific thing and ignoring that, sorry, there's a political or cultural or racially driven focus. Didn't the Spanish have a thing called the Inquisition?
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me what those were, if not some sort of sacrifice.
I remember a song about that. It goes, the Inquisition, the Inquisition.
Yeah. You have all of these, it's bad when not Christian white people do it, but when Christian white people do it, it's okay.
Yeah.
And if it's Christian white people against white people, it's okay. Yeah. Or if it's Christian white people against other Christian white people whose denomination is a little bit different, like, I don't know, the Lutherans, or, what's her name? Bloody Mary, the Queen. Mm-hmm. If you're not Catholic, there's a bad time. Humans being horrible to each other is a thing throughout history. Great. If you don't acknowledge it as a part of, hey, this is history, we've moved past it, let's be lucky. But pointing out political stuff tied to it and trying to make a political argument for doing this, that is
and let's
hypocrisy at its finest.
And let's look at what the impact they have. Watch this. This is just nuts, because the end of this letter and what comes of it is even crazier. So I'm asking you, President Trump, to remove the Society for American Archaeology from its advisory role to the United States government, and to reduce or remove their federal funding, which they don't get any federal funding, but whatever. In many ways, it is not acting as a scientific body because they push back against pseudoscience. While we do need archaeologists to weigh in on so many things, we also need unbiased scientists, period, in any and every field. The scientific method is designed in part to eliminate personal bias. A political ideology permeating any field will reduce its members' willingness to go against the majority consensus, which will reduce their ability to properly inform the public. I believe the removal of the SAA from its advisory role to the U.S. government, as well as ceasing all federal funding to the SAAs, would not only go a long way towards cleaning up the field of archaeology in the U.S., but could also eventually restore some of the public's faith in the scientific process. If the world sees the U.S. scientific organizations cannot moonlight as political advertising firms, perhaps we can return the perception of American science to the status it held in my youth, but that will require bravery and diligence. Thank you for your time, and I hope this concerns you as much as it does me. Sincerely, Dan Richards. Notice the date, the 29th of December, 2024. Now, this matters. Because, so the reason why this matters is because this went further. These people are accusing us of being political. I don't go fucking writing letters to Donald Trump to remove Hancock's books or something like that. No, I make my case on social media and whatnot.
It doesn't apply to him.
Yeah.
Also, unbiased science. I want to ask something about unbiased science. How is RFK unbiased? This is outside of our wheelhouse, dealing with vaccines and disease. I mean, but you look at how the sciences and how historic preservation stuff is has been defunded, has been butchered and chopped up, has been, regulated. They're pushing, this administration is pushing the removal of history that is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So that's like taking down the signs, the interpretive signs at Wounded Knee, saying that the U.S. Army butchered, 300 and change women and children. I can't even remember what the number is because that's just in my head for the longest time. Here's an atrocity done by people that, we got a bunch of medals of honor from it. The if there was truly unbiased science like he wants it to be, he sure as hell better be standing up and screeching in that direction too. There is no do it one side and ignore the other. That's bias, and he wants it unbiased. So, but I do want to say something about Doge.
Yes.
He got his wish, didn't he? Because Doge went in, and not only did it access a bunch of information, and I mean, people watching this, people in the comments, and people, they might not know how bad this is, but as a federal, I saw every single thing that went through. I saw every single email saying, we literally got emails saying, this is acceptable, this is not spam. I'm sorry, that sounds like a spam account to me. I mean, we go through training on you don't accept emails from unverified email accounts, and it goes to your phishing filter. And if you don't, and they'll send you fake ones to catch you, to see if you remember your training. And it's literally if you click on the link because you think it comes from somebody because it looks like it's a legitimate magazine article, it'll say, ding, you've been caught, and there'll be a note that, oh, hey, you should refer back to your training. They literally got in and did shenanigans like that. And then all of these contracts got canceled, all which go to, like, I have talked to ARCs or other researchers dealing with wildlife or fisheries or timber, private sector outfits, who their contracts got canceled.
Yeah.
Why?
Of course.
Oh, because Doge decided that the money had to go somewhere else.
Save money.
I had a friend who worked for the Army Corps of Engineers, or still does. They shut off the fuel cards for the vehicles to save money because Doge said so. Doge got in and did all of this stuff, and we're seeing it. It is not unknown, but it's like there's no acknowledgement of how it's actually affecting people. Meanwhile, I'm standing here looking at how the budgets are affecting stuff that I deal with personally in the field, like fire suppression, mitigation, proper mitigation and survey work for all the departments, not just heritage, but fisheries, botany, wildlife bio, all of these, things. And then with them trying to cut down because now there's no money in it and we have no money for some reason, they're trying to cut down the workforce. It got to such a spectacle that they paid in the second round of deferred resignations, which means you're still getting paid through the end of the fiscal year, which is in September. They had 15,000 people in the Department of Agriculture across all the agencies leave, accept the resignation and leave. And the lady who's in charge of the USDA went in front of the Senate Appropriations Board and said, we need to hire 4,000 positions, critical positions. And somebody on the board said, didn't you just pay 15,000 people to leave?
Yeah.
They have reached out to people who
left to come
took
back
the resignation, asking them to come back. They have reached out to people who took the resignation to ask them to come back, not reinstate them fully, but ask them to come back and actually work, which was not a part of the original agreement.
Of course not.
Because these people who were in a different department or different field, but happen to be fire certified to cover the logistics.
It's important. You need the right people that have the right training, the right certifications.
These are the cooks. These are the financial people. All this stuff. So the fact that you have somebody who's very extreme in their views going up and saying, "Oh, please do this," and then suddenly it's happening. I don't think they listen to him. But I think there's an awareness, there's a lack of awareness of what this actually means, which brings us back to like Oak Flats. Oak Flats is, the Apache are fighting it tooth and nail. There's other tribes involved in the thing as well.
It looks like it's on pause, I see.
it's on
Oh,
pause.
that's actually from a while ago.
But-
Never mind.
But they just what's that from 23 or
That's
something?
from 2023.
They just released. I think they just put it through as they can go through with it. I don't know if they're actually going to. It's still in limbo. But like with what's happening today, like right now, is the people in the government Republicans in the government trying to push the sale of public lands.
Exactly.
Where all of this cultural heritage stuff is.
Mm-hmm. Which will let it be just demolished.
Which will let it be
the
demolished.
real problem.
And
this is what
ironically, that gets rid of all of that obnoxious evidence that indigenous peoples were able to create their own stuff without the help of white folks. Oh, I just made a circle.
You made a circle. But let's also be clear. The SAA as an advisory body is not advising in any way the government about whether a book should be published or a TV show should be published. They are advising the government on the development of landscapes and how that impacts cultural heritage. They're advising the government on the development of infrastructure for museums and education. They're not doing anything remotely political. And that's where I find it funny to see how these pseudo-archaeologists work. Let's go back to that letter. This was December 29th, 2024. Right? So last year, December 29th, the very next day, Jimmy Corsetti, or the same day, Corsetti says, defund the Society for American Archaeology at Doge at SAA.org. Look at the top reply here. Do you know who Jacob Angeli Chansley is?
No.
He's also known as the QAnon shaman. He's the QAnon shaman saying thank you for all you do. Yeah, here's his picture. Let's make it bigger.
Yeah. So the people who are, who are a keystone to one of the biggest treasonous acts in this country's history, I don't care if they've been pardoned or not, is saying, hey, cool.
Yeah.
So defunding stuff that will result in who push back against the things that destroy indigenous cultural resources.
And Morgan, it gets even worse. It gets even worse because this got Jimmy Corsetti to go on a tangent for the next 24 hours, tweeting out all this negative stuff about the SAAs, and look who replied. The Society for American Archaeology should be a private organization, which it is, that receives funding from members, but they also serve as an advisory funding. The person who says, I will be checking into this, I am all for preserving our history, but if an organization is wasting our money, not okay, is Anna Paulina Luna, who is a congresswoman.
Fantastic.
She is from Florida. She is in our government. She is a Florida congresswoman who is saying that she's going to check into this. She's a huge fan of Jimmy Corsetti, by the way. She has several tweets, like this one about how granite cannot be cut, apparently, and she finds that fascinating. And she also states that she's going to start the Ancient Civilizations and Archaeology Caucus because there's so much history that she's interested in. So this is outright politics powwowing with a congresswoman who is apparently going to investigate the lies that these people are saying about archaeology and the Society for American Archaeology and all these kinds of things.
But remember, Dan has called for no politics in archaeology and science.
And yet here they are being about as political as they can be.
Graham Hancock also praised that letter.
Yeah.
He deleted his tweet.
Did he? I did not know this. Okay.
I saw it and I was like, because I'm not on Twitter. I have a Twitter account that it's not actually tied to any of my social media stuff. It's from a long time ago. Then I just haven't shut it off. But I saw something that linked to that. And I think it might have been another archaeologist on TikTok who said something about it. And I went and I looked, and sure enough, he didn't flat say that he was okay with Trump and Musk, but it was a praising of Dan for doing diligent work, was Graham Hancock. And then of course it disappeared because I went looking for it because, lo and behold, April 14th, I get fired from working with the federal government along with 30,000 others for a bullshit fake lied reason that got overturned in court, and we've all been hired back because it was blatantly illegal. I went looking for it because, well, I was fired. Now I have all this time to make content and actually be a creator, right? Because that's a real job. And I couldn't find it. So, but I did write a letter to Graham Hancock that I couldn't send to anybody. I couldn't send it to his publisher. I couldn't send it to him. It was too long. And I'm like, but it literally is hey, I get it that you don't like us. I get it that it makes good television. I get it. But understand something. The people that believe you are doing this. And guess what? Here's somebody from this end, from the far end of the spectrum, whose life is getting fucked with.
Yeah.
So exactly. I get, if you don't think your TV show or your books or have any sort of negative impact, well, that's a load of shit.
Yeah.
And I wasn't able to send it, and I parked it. I was like, I'm going to go do something else. But it's one of those things that does come back to this does have an effect to others. And I made a video a while back, and if we're not at that point, we'll talk about it in a bit. The acolytes doing things because.
Yeah, let's go on. Yeah, let's do that because the acolytes are doing things. Yeah.
So I made a video a while back. This is actually when the first season came out of Ancient Apocalypse, and you hear about how they go about things. And again, working in a federal capacity, doing archaeology, doing heritage, doing preservation work and stuff like I do, I have a pretty straightforward and insider look at how things are done, including, of all things, filming permits. When I worked for the Bureau of Land Management, one of the places that we took care of, and I did lots of preservation work on it, using, I had a guy making handmade wire nails to keep the buildings as intact and maintaining as much integrity as possible. We would have people come to this little ghost town because it's beautifully preserved and want to film things. And it was literally, hey, you have to talk to our recreation manager and our PR person, and you have to present them with a plan, a proposal, and say, this is what you're doing with it, and this is what you intend to do with it. And this is the legal blah, 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 blah jargon of, hey, we need to make sure that what you do doesn't have a bad reflection on us, have a bad reflection anywhere down the line, to avoid lawsuits, because we're a sue-happy country in the United States. And it's literally, there's a bunch of stuff in place made by lawyers to go, hey, you need to follow A, B, and C. It's the same way. Trump got in trouble for it, having cameras at Arlington. Technically, you're not allowed to do that unless you have a permit. And the president might not need a permit, but his film crew does.
Yeah, so, that's true.
Serpent Mound was in the TV show. But Graham Hancock is, of course, talking about it from the parking lot. Why? Showmanship, for one. But two was I don't know if it was the producers or whatever. They just didn't call ahead of time. I don't know. It was they didn't get their permit. And one of the things that was kicked back by the park, by the PR person from the park, media relations coordinator, was, hey, this is going to have a negative output on the indigenous peoples and cultures whose ancestors built this. Literally the point that the SAAs were trying to make. Same thing. There is no evidence for this, and we can't allow it, because the moment it comes out, the tribe is going to get upset. That's what happened in Arizona with the second season, with all of the indigenous nations down there said something about it, and they changed the episode, and they didn't go film in the Grand Canyon. Well, if you notice something in this email, this was posted on Graham Hancock's website. His producer's name is blacked out.
Yeah.
The
email address.
But poor Savannah, her work email, her work phone, her address are on his website. And the moment I saw that, I went selfishly, I'm going to make some content out of this. And I did exactly what I was going to condemn him for. I used her email, and I sent her an email, and I said, hey, I am a creator on TikTok. I'm also an archaeologist who works with agency. I want to know how many people have contacted you, if you can share, because I'm also aware that they can say, hey, we can't give out that information. How many people have contacted you about the conspiracy stuff and the Graham Hancock stuff and accusing you of hiding the truth? And I got an email from somebody, not her,
Okay.
saying that this person is not available to talk, is no longer in this position.
Yeah,
and
that's what I
cannot
heard.
speak on it. But yes, we've received emails. That was the end of the conversation. I sent him a thing back and I said, yeah, I figured. Thank you so much for even letting me know that little bit. And then I made the video saying, oh, by the way, he doxed a state employee.
And I want to be clear, this is like a really common tactic that all of these people use.
Mhm.
So Jimmy Corsetti, why is this screen share not working? One second. I'm having problems here.
I got in a Twitter fight with Scott Wolter once. That was funny.
One second.
He called me sweetheart.
Let's go here. Here we go. This is going to work now. So, for example, there we go. Yeah. Do you have problems with Flint Dibble's online conduct? Contact Cardiff University to get him fired. This is Jimmy Corsetti right here, right? And I cropped it out, but he put in my email address. He put in the phone number for Cardiff University's HR, and they certainly got contacted to try to get me fired because of this. Or the other thing that he's done. So in addition to this, let me find it. It's in this PowerPoint right here. He actually called on, this is around the same time Ancient Apocalypse came out. He called on his fans to leave fake reviews on all the SAA board's books on Amazon. He suggested, so he said, call out all these people to correlate Ancient Apocalypse. These are the people making the statements. He leaves their email addresses. It's time to stop letting organizations, media outlets hide. We must remember these entities and their decisions are created by people, individuals. Putting their names and photos on blast holds them accountable. Somebody says, what should I do to hold them accountable? He says, call out their internet behavior online so others can see it when they Google search them. Leave authors appropriate reviews of their books on Amazon. Leave professors appropriate reviews on ratemyprofessor.com. Bill Farley had dozens of fake reviews on his Rate My Professor. Several of them are still up there because they would not remove them all.
Vaguely like a conspiracy. Like they're trying to control the narrative of something.
Mm-hmm. Trying to shut down discourse.
So what have we covered? We've covered is they get upset when we call them out for something or attack our appearance or whatever. Because my appearance has been attacked, your appearance has been attacked. Everybody. I mean, I feel incredibly.
What do you mean? I'm sexy, man. I'm like totally sexy. Who's attacked my appearance?
You know, I haven't, but you know, I mean, I don't even want to get into the gender related shit that women, and others, you know, for doing the same thing we are, you know, and they get the
Kaylee's
extra dollop
history of Kaylee's in the chat.
Yeah, they get the extra dollop of threats of assault in those ways or death. You know, I've been told to go out and do it myself by people who don't like the fact that I'm pushing back against pseudoscience. But I've yet to have somebody say, "Oh, I'm going to come do it for you." Yeah. Is that because I'm 6'3" and scarier than you? Oh, can it? But they attack. So they attack our presence. They attack us on a physical level. They attack us on a mental level. So of course, if you have autism or ADHD or depression or any of that, they're going to go for it. And then they attack you professionally all the time, saying that we do it to them, when all we're saying is, hey, you've got to show evidence. Hey, this stuff is not correct. This is not backed up by anything. Hey, you got your idea from a 19th century racist white person.
Yeah.
Holy shit. And it's
like
holding them accountable for what actually happens today. Because I've had people quote the Graham Hancock stuff at me as a justification for looting an archaeological site. They weren't here. Graham Hancock's civilization did it. Do you remember Kennewick Man?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so for everybody who doesn't know, I'm going to give the quick rundown. Kennewick Man was a set of 8,600 and change 8,600 year old bones found near Kennewick, Washington, on the Columbia River. Long 20-something year back and forth between the Army Corps of Engineers, the University of Washington, the indigenous tribes of the area, including the Colville, and a bunch of other people, because a number of tribes tried to claim the remains because he's 8,600 years old. He's obviously indigenous. In the late 90s, after Graham Hancock's first book, and I'm just postulating for fun here because I see it so much I wouldn't be surprised. Take it with a grain. I'll say that. Take it with a grain of salt. But in like 1998, 99, they did a facial reconstruction of what Kennewick Man looked like. And he's in the clay, just the clay color, which is grayish white. And Kennewick Man looked suspiciously like Patrick Stewart. Whether or not that was intentional, I don't know. But he looked like Patrick Stewart. And the Colville were claiming him. A bunch of other tribes in that region were claiming him. The Army Corps of Engineers were literally going, hey, well, we don't have any
And
proof
yes,
on this.
is it okay if I show the memes? There's memes of Kennewick Man looking like.
But one of the things, one of the groups that came out of the woodwork, was a white supremacy neo-Nazi group out of Minnesota who went, well, he's white, which means the Solutreans. And it was the Americas were colonized by white people first, and then indigenous people showed up and killed them all. So therefore, they deserve A, B, and C.
Yeah,
literally.
No, this is extremely common. This is what happens.
Misconstruing.
Yeah.
What's in these books, and tying it to their own.
I mean, there are 3 examples that I know of. One of them's on film. A couple of them are in print, of outright neo-Nazis saying that they use Graham Hancock's books to recruit.
Yeah.
There are 3 different examples that I know of. I showed one on film in my Archaeology Wars video. And so, I get that Graham Hancock has never said anything that is disparaging of different groups of people. He has never done that. So calling him an outright racist is wrong, and I never do. But he needs to acknowledge that what he says through his ideas have a fucking impact, and that there's other people out there.
Not is making you question things.
The fact that he doesn't stick up. Yeah, exactly. If neo-Nazis were using my shit, I'd be like, fuck off, neo-Nazis.
Yeah.
You're trash.
Hell, I don't do things for my content out of concerns of what people is going to do with them. I don't go to archaeological sites where there's identifiable anything in the background. I don't show artifacts. I talk about stuff. And if I do show an artifact, it's a picture. And again, there's nothing identifiable behind it. I don't say where I am, for the simple fact that there are people who are going to, and this I'm going to say is the tamest part, going to go out and try to loot these sites.
Of course.
And it doesn't lessen the issues, but it is the tamest, I think, of where this is going, especially in 2025, where there are going to be people who are going to take what I say and cut it up, turn it around, put it on the television show or in their content, and just so happen to remove a bunch of context that showed that I actually was not agreeing with this or whatever. So yeah, there are groups that use this stuff. And if he's not calling them out, if he's not going, hey, yo, slam on the brakes, this is bullshit, that is very telling. And that is holding people accountable on a grand scale. One of this gets away from Hancock, but goes into reality TV. The thing on the front of, I don't know if you've ever watched those car shows on Discovery. I was tired of them real quick, like Gas Monkey Garage or Drag Race America or whatever, where they have in the very beginning, but it's in small letters, these are on closed courses by professional drivers. Do not attempt this at home. There have been dozens of people injured, number of people killed, because they watch these shows and they go, oh, I can drag race. And then they go out with their cars, which have probably too much horsepower for them to drive anyway, and they drag race and they T-bone somebody at an intersection, or they spin out and go into the crowd. And that is one of these reasons why the car shows, had to come out and say, hey, this is really scripted stuff and we're on a closed course and this isn't real. They got up and said it because there is literally people dying over there. This is real life stuff. So when you look at the Graham Hancock shows and stuff like that, I mean, I've had people say, hey, it's funny to watch. I'm like, you want to watch funny ancient alien stuff, watch Stargate. That's funny.
Yeah, exactly.
It's never been presented as anything other than campy sci-fi. But when you watch something that is presented with entertainment value only in little letters down in the credits 4 lines back where you've already turned off your television, that's not making sure stuff doesn't go the way.
And it has a real
you're seeing
impact.
it go.
It has a huge impact.
Yeah.
Like people go, like you said, and loot stuff, or for example, they purchase stuff on the black market. So like, this guy, Marcel Foti, he brags about how he licks stones that his uncle or someone took from the pyramids back like 30 years ago. Or Uncharted X, he produces all these videos on granite vases that might be forgeries, or if not, they're looted from Egypt. Matt Bial, who hosts a podcast, has literally claimed that because of Uncharted X, he started collecting hundreds of granite vases that he purchases from auctions and stuff like that. You do realize it's been illegal to export artifacts from Egypt since 1912. Since 1912. And there's not a single bit of documentation on this shit. And so, it's illegal to purchase that shit in the US since the 70s. And he's right now, this weekend, at the Cosmic Summit, showing off his collection of granite vases to all these pseudo-archaeologists like Dan and whatever that are there. And so it's just like, this has real impact. Or all these pseudo-archaeologists that break into sites with their drones to film shit and trespass in order to damage shit. There's a reason why
we don't do that.
Yeah. Or
you have to have a license and be a qualified pilot to fly a drone in a capacity for any sort of the resource management, heritage, whatever, fire. You have to be like trained. So when people go, oh, hey, well, I don't have to do this stuff. These are the people who fly the drones near the airports too, to get pictures of airplanes while they're landing. You know what the FAA is going to do if they cause an accident? There's a reason why these things are not legal to do.
Yeah, because it's damaging and dangerous. So, and on that note, let's look at what Jimmy Corsetti has to say. Because this is talk about cognitive dissonance. First, let's look at what his opinion is towards Giza because of the new pyramid scans.
So are we really going to pretend that this use of technology would not in any way be influenced by a massive water table below the ground? And I find it particularly odd that that was completely omitted from the study altogether. Again, I'm a very open-minded person. And I would say, if nothing else, this requires further study and exploration. If it was up to me, we would drill a hole straight down through the Giza Plateau, stick a camera down there with a light and investigate. And that'd be the quickest way to do it. It wouldn't cause any damage. This is doable. It's probably not going to happen. But I will say that I have significant doubts about this study and the implications. I think that it has been massively exaggerated. I think that to suggest that these 600 meter long pillars made up of a spiral staircase is vastly different from the images that they presented. And
so he doesn't think that these new pyramid scans have any truth to them, but he thinks we should drill a hole several kilometers below Giza.
A camera on a string, literally, with a flashlight. Is it a new GoPro with a LED light taped to it? I mean, what are we doing here?
We're talking about a little handheld drill to go down 2 kilometers, right?
And you mean to tell me that people haven't already tried to drill through the bedrock of the Giza Plateau to get, I don't know, the water table in the desert?
They have. In fact, there's publications on that, which he actually, to give him credit, I mentioned earlier in that chat, and so did he. But yeah, it's just like, what the hell? But then
it'd be great if he cited his sources when he talks about stuff.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That's another thing we talk about.
What I thought was funny is he actually accused me of plagiarizing him during this chat for citing the water table because he had tweeted about it the day before we went on Piers Morgan. I had done a video on the water table at Giza a week before he ever tweeted on it. So it was just like he retracted his accusation as soon as I shared that screenshot.
That's a case of, hey, I'm going to throw something out there and muddy the waters a bit.
Yeah. But then this is the real hypocrisy. That's his attitude towards Giza. We have no evidence that these scans are real, but let's drill a 2-kilometer deep hole. And then he breaks into Göbekli Tepe.
Let's instead take a closer look at where these beams are planted.
Yeah.
Real quick, I want to ask some. He snuck into Göbekli Tepe. Can you back that screen up just a little bit?
Yeah.
Just
back it up further.
No. Go forward.
And
hold. All these people up in the right-hand corner there, they sneak in too?
Well, he wore a disguise because he thought he was sanctioned by the Turkish government.
Why? Oh, I'm sorry. He's not getting into Turkey. In 2025, what do you do? Wear the nose and the glasses and the mustache?
He wore sunglasses and a hat. It is the funniest little disguise ever. And
wow.
It's
why on earth would he be sanctioned by the Turkish government?
He wasn't. He just pretended he was.
So he's made up stuff to get attention and flavor up his content. Oh,
Flavor
wow.
Flav.
What is that? Drama. Gotcha. Cool.
He did break into other sites though, where he walked over railings and shit like that, like at Karahan Tepe and Cyberch. But whatever. Let's see what he has to say about Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe though, because the cognitive dissonance with this guy is legit.
Let's instead take a closer look at where these beams are planted into the ground, where holes were drilled into the heart of the ancient ruins that make up this site, which again, much of which isn't even excavated, as you can see from all the surrounding rubble. The truth is that they built this thing long before further excavations should have taken place, and tourism was ultimately made the priority over excavations, hence why they have no intention to fully excavate it for practically hundreds of years. But notice just how close these steel beams are located to the ruins. Surely great precautions must have been taken before drilling the holes that would house these steel beams, which of course would have been filled with poured concrete to establish the structural foundation. And notice that one of these beams comes quite close to pillar number 43, the most widely discussed relic at Göbekli Tepe. So here's a very sincere question. Were any ancient ruins damaged during the drilling of these dozens of holes that would later hold these steel beams? And look at just how deep these holes go. I estimate a solid 18 to 20 feet or 6 meters, far deeper than I was expecting. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if not one single archaeologist was involved in the planning of this roof. Because honestly, I cannot imagine any archaeologist thinking that drilling a dozen or so 20-foot deep holes right into a field of unexcavated ruins would be a good idea.
So he wants to drill 2 kilometers down at Giza.
Yeah.
But it's a problem when archaeologists excavate areas before drilling a 20-meter hole for a roof to protect the site.
Let's talk about that, because hey, this is something that is a part of what I do. A project like this here in the States, and pretty sure in Turkey, would fall under a mitigation project. Here's the proposal. They want to build a structure. What do they have to do? Oh, here's the areas of disturbance. How many pillars? Let's call it 20. 20 spots need to be drilled. What's the ground disturbance? If it's a hole that's the size of a basketball, say, and it goes down X amount of feet, that's a lot of digging to do a full unit excavation down however far it needs to go. So they've taken that into account. They would then probably use an auger to drill the hole. What that means is that they have a monitor on site watching the machine do this. I've done this work. It's boring. It also is extremely exciting because the machine will kick up something that, everything stops and everybody gets very upset.
Nah, they do that differently here. In this area of the world, you'd have to excavate the area you're going to drill first all the way down to either bedrock or natural soil. Okay. That would be the requirement. I've worked on projects like this in Greece right next to
so that's in Greece. In the States, it's a little bit different based on the size of the project. If it was a bigger project, yes, we'd excavate it 100%. Did he remotely see what the Turkish cultural requirements are? Because it's not an American site.
Or
not
even look at the publications. Those trenches for those holes are published. They're already published in full detail. I've talked about some of them with Professor Lee Clare on my YouTube.
That's what I was going to say next, is that yes, they did excavate it down, and they took those postage stamps of the site, and they're extremely well documented. So when they do get to that point, whether it's excavated all the way back, they can take this data segment and put it into the hole. Boom. You now have a ever expanding, uninterrupted picture of what the site's going to look like after it's excavated.
Exactly. Oh,
it will also contain the modern disturbances. It will also contain stuff like animal burrows. You know, you can't tell me that when they did a cultural survey of that site in 1994, they ignored the fact that at some point in the 30s, somebody put a road through there and didn't know the site was there or didn't care. And that people have been driving on that road forever. I want to know where his outrage about the road is. That means the conspiracy has been going back till 1912 or 19 whatever, whenever they built the goat path, walking animals up the hill and down again. That's technically a disturbance of these sites.
That's
so when you have a site like this, yeah.
We have the goat herders, the olive orchard, and the drillers.
You know, the archaeology at all of these sites, when a disturbance comes up, we have to do this work. We have to do this work. And something, and there is the consultation that we need to do. If I have a timber sale, which I do, I've got like 7 timber sales I'm working on right now. If it comes near a cultural site of importance to the tribe who is right next door, I have to reach out to their preservation officer and I have to say, hey, this is what we want to do. This is the plan. This is the proposal. What is your opinion on this? If he says, hey, we don't want to dig it at all, don't do testing, can you reroute the road? That's one of the first things we're going to do. If he says, hey, we don't know what's there, can we do some shovel tests? We'll do some shovel tests. If we turn up the shovel tests and it kicks up something really interesting, then we'll come to that, okay, we're going to put in a test unit or we're going to do an excavation. Mind you, though, we have the timber sale to think about. We have all of this other stuff that we have to address. Now, if it's going to be easier to reroute the road around this ridge and go somewhere else with it and long line the logs down the slope, that's the mitigation. We're going to say, hey, this is how you're going to do this. And that's how that cultural resource either is protected or is protected until we can get an excavation going on it, which takes time, money, resources, which of course we don't have. So there is a process to go through that he obviously doesn't know anything about. Those plans, how long do you think those plans were in the planning process? And they put it in a budget. So they had years of planning, because you don't just plan a structure like that overnight, even in AutoCAD. You plan the structure, you run it by a committee that says, hey, we're okay with this design, or they go, that doesn't match the aesthetic. It goes through a bunch of committees before it even hits Heritage. And then Heritage goes, here's our heritage concern. You're going to dig 20 holes. We have to do 20 excavations down to bedrock or refusal.
And extend them when you find new like architecture and context that you need to document. I mean, we were part of one in Greece where we started off with 2x2 meter trenches, right? So most of them were really simple. There's not much there. But when we found stuff, one of them got extended to something like a 12x12. Like it was enormous so that we could document what was there before we had to drill in this column there.
My very first job in the Southwest was slightly funny because it became a joke. Is it an ulna? That we were digging these trenches. We were digging these trenches that were like 30 centimeters wide. They're not very big. And they were down to bedrock. And the bedrock in this area was very shallow. So we're just digging these exploratory trenches. We've cleared the prickly pear, which did not get rid of the needles. My knees still hate me from that. And we were carving them out by hand. And this was going to be before we did a full excavation on this Pueblo complex that was there by hand. So we were doing these test trenches. I think there were about 18 of them on the site. Well, somebody, of course, on like 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon, kicked up a bone fragment. and it was intact enough to where there was no question that it was human. Okay. Well, when a bone fragment comes up here, you have to dig a meter by meter 3-dimensional space around that fragment to make sure you clear human remains, not artifacts, but human remains by itself. And what ended up happening was there were 13 disarticulated left arms in that particular room. This is a reflection of a cultural practice from a tribe a long time ago. The site was 1,700 years old. But the point is that we excavated this massive thing during a test because we kept finding on the periphery of these excavations other human remains, other artifacts, and we had to clear them. We had to clear them before we could dig, which seems crazy that we're digging, but we have to clear it before we dig. And that whole site is gone now. It's obliterated. The Arizona Highway Department removed 50,000, well, not tons, but 50,000 pounds of hillside gone to make a road project happen. But that was one of those things that, we have a list of things that we have to do in order for things to go through like that. They did it at this site. If he doesn't cite those reports, he doesn't cite those studies, he doesn't actually point those things out. So he can't say nothing happened. Postulating the question, he can answer his own question. It's 2025. But the amount of documentation that goes into these sites, I don't think they get that, well, we've already accounted for a lot of this stuff. And even if it's, hey, we found stuff that we don't quite know what it is, we've accounted for it in 3-dimensional space. We've counted the provenience of it. We've accounted for depth. It's been scanned, photographed, everything, so we can go back to those records. And those disturbed spots have all been addressed. His olive trees, which we can talk about. I read a fantastic article not 20 minutes before we started this talk. The olive trees are, we talked about this before we started the stream, but the olive trees, according to this article, were planted by the landowner like 30 years ago. And it has something to do with like a tax credit or a government subsidy if you have trees that produce something on your property. So he plants these things on a hill. And I don't know what the growth rate of trees there is, but if he plants them and an olive tree has to reach a certain size and they don't do that in that region for 50 years, he planted these trees 50 years ago. And of course they look like an orchard. He planted an orchard. I don't know when they planted them.
I think he planted them in the late 90s or so. So what the story is that Lee and other members of the team have shared and has been published and stuff is sort of after the site started being excavated, the landowner realized that the Turkish state was going to expropriate the land to turn it into an archaeological park. And so he immediately planted olive trees because it doesn't matter how big they are. As soon as those trees have been transplanted there and put there, it becomes classified as a different economic type of land, which then means it automatically means the Turkish government will pay him more for that land. It's just
so
simple
it's a conspiracy to rip off the government.
And this happens everywhere. This is normal.
Yeah, it does, because I told you my story about the cow.
Yeah, exactly.
We had a guy here, local, who bought a bunch of land and was going to get a tax credit from the state of Montana for having cattle. And he bought 500 cattle and he let them go in the woods on his property. And they didn't stay in the woods on his property. And some of them got hit on the highway and some of them got eaten by bears. And it became this whole big thing. And it's I was trying to get a tax credit. Why doesn't he acknowledge that part? That's what I was going to get to, is why doesn't he acknowledge the fact that, hey, here is why these were actually planted? Because the headline of the article that I read that in flat says the olive trees are being removed to prevent damage to the site. He's not wrong about roots causing damage to ruins. We all agree that happens.
So it's
but he's not acknowledging that it's but he's not acknowledging that context. He's and again, like so many others, his audience isn't going to acknowledge that context either. They either
what he's talking to me, for
want
example,
to, or they're not going to present it.
about a year ago when this whole thing blew up, when Jimmy blew this up about the olive trees, I wrote a thread that said, like, look, I published on trees on sites and how the damage they can do, but they can also be beneficial, meaning they stop erosion. So I wrote a series of tweets, some of them talking about the damage trees can do, some of them talking about the benefits trees can do, and then the ending by saying that, hey, I trust the archaeologists there. They're managing the site. They're going to do what's in the good interest of the site. And
they're removing the trees.
He then hundreds of times, dozens of times, probably dozen times since then, he has just clipped out the tweet where I say that trees are beneficial because they prevent erosion. And then he accuses me of only saying that, ignoring the fact that I published a peer-reviewed fucking article showing the damage that trees do, and I cited it in that thread. And it's just
you
like,
don't do citations in peer review and conspiracy theory. We don't do that here.
Yeah, of course not. Here, wait, Tristan had a really good point. And the Anarchaeologist. We have to remember that conspiracy theories are conspiracy. They don't need to have logical consistency or relate to evidence. We need to keep calling it out. And yeah, that's exactly how it is. Yeah.
I mean, my experience with Jimmy is pretty limited. I responded to some of the stuff he's posted on TikTok. But I sent you a video, and I don't know if it made the cut, but there's a video that he posted. It's a tweet of his. With the flatbed trailer.
Yeah.
And you don't have to bring it up. I mean, if it's too much trouble. The picture is a giant stone block that has horseshoed a trailer. And he goes, "Oh, well, they expect us to say that they hauled 70-ton blocks 500 miles to the pyramids, but modern technology can't do it today." I'm sorry. I've seen what happens when you drop an engine block into the back of a truck without using your head, and it folded the back of the pickup truck. And the engine block's 500 pounds. What is the context of a semi-trailer that's folded like this with a giant marble block on it? Who messed it up? That's why OSHA exists. Who messed it up? What was the condition of the trailer? What was the condition of the machine that was loading the trailer? Was the driver new? Was the operator new? Were they in a rush? Was it 4:59 on Friday? All of these things that literally account for, hey, this trailer is now broken in half because of a giant stone block. Meanwhile, he's ignoring the fact that there's machines on that site that are moving the blocks just fine. And there's trucks leaving the site with blocks on them just fine. It's this one incident, this one OSHA oops, that he's like, oh, well, this is proof that they can't do it. Why?
Which is totally ridiculous. He must have seen David Miano's video where David Miano shows like trucks and major machinery moving stuff that is much larger and much heavier than any block moved in the past. It's just like look, these people are frauds. They consciously ignore the evidence that exists in order to spin a reality to their fans and their followers to get clicks, to get money, because their job,
as he
told me, his job is to lie. As he put it, that's my job, Flint, just doing my job. And that's what they
do. So that's why we always have to take it with a grain of salt. We have to call it out. And this might feel like a personal attack on them because we're taking away their revenue stream. However,
do you see the attacks they're doing to us?
Oh, yeah. But there's also content creators out there who are making money, who are supporting themselves. Milo is a great example of this.
Yeah.
With factual stuff, interesting factual stuff. All of these things that is directly against what they do, showing that it is possible to tell the truth, showcase things that weren't built by white people, not fall into this conspiracy stuff. Hey, you could do an entire show on debunking conspiracies and people would love it.
Of course.
Because you have the drama of the conspiracy. You have the drama of the conspiracy, and then you have the drama of the people who are trying to debunk it, going, hey, A, B, C, and D. People are learning stuff. People are going, oh, I never knew this. That is one of the things I feel, and I have been told this in my content, which is really important to me, is that people go, hey, I used to read his books. I used to watch Ancient Aliens, and then I saw you. And I'm like, okay, cool. And they're like, no, you don't understand. I have a completely different awareness about how I'm in the woods now, how I'm interacting with the landscape. People who used to pick up an arrowhead when they saw it now understand that not only is it illegal, that's the first thing, it's illegal, but people don't seem to care about that. This actually has a tie to the landscape. There are people who look at this landscape because their ancestors made these things and have an emotional, physical response to these places. And they're now aware of the damage that's being done, of how it's affecting other people, the awareness of stuff that isn't taught in school, isn't readily available. I can tell you that there are people who are very intelligent, very, very empathetic and aware of the world around them, but they're not out west here. So until they either see something that speaks to them or they're here and experiencing it, they still don't have an understanding of it. We are able to bring forth information and say, here's this. And if it doesn't make them understand 100%, it opens that door for them to be aware and walk through it.
Yeah.
And it's really rankles the conspiracy sides hide when we say, hey, this is what you're doing. This is the negative. These are the people you're hurting.
Yeah.
Who are we hurting? We've hurt Graham Hancock's feelings. Oh, I get my feelings hurt when I put gas in my truck every day.
I find it funny how in Hancock's podcast tour, where he blasted me in front of millions and millions of people, he whined about how I talked about how people no longer believe in his theories because of me. And he's he's bragging about how, and it's like, dude, screw you. You're publishing these addresses. You're doing all this kind of stuff. You are openly inciting hatred towards archaeologists with every single sort of thing that you do. And specifically hatred towards me now. And,
you have the audacity to stand up to him.
Yeah, exactly. The audacity, indeed.
The audacity.
So on that note, I think we should start thinking about wrapping up a bit.
Okay. I carry on.
Yeah, it's a little late here. I got to eat dinner and get another beer at some point Friday night. But one second, my patrons, if you are a member of my Patreon or my channel members, you get to find out who I have on and you get to ask questions in advance. So we have a good question for you right now, which is, how can you be the voice of reason amid all the noise?
Jameson. I'm sorry. I
beer.
There's a joke that archaeologists drink too much. Might be true. How can I be the voice of reason in all the noise? Because in the back of my mind, I know it's important. It's the same reason I can go do my job. It's the same reason that I continue, especially in this political climate in the United States, get up and go. And when I know that there's people out there who just absolutely do not give a shit about what I do, it's still important, because 50,000 people can tell me that they don't think I have a legitimate job and they don't care about what I'm doing. But it's the one person who goes, hey, I'm so glad you recorded this, because this is something that my family, who's lived here for 1,000 years, don't remember. That is the, how do I keep quiet? How do I keep my mind through the noise? I also am really loud, so I make more noise.
I think I agree with you both of those. And I mean, I get this a lot where people are like, how the hell do you stand up to these people? And it's just like, well, the entire field is with us because we know these people are frauds and lying about us. So it's like, I go into work every day and my colleagues are like, dude, you're kicking ass at this. It's like, and like my students are like, you're kicking ass at this. My colleagues online are like, you're kicking ass at this. And there's about 1 million people that are telling me that I'm a fucking piece of shit. But like everybody that I care about, meaning people that are informed, people that are experts, people that are friends and colleagues and family of mine, they all support me. So in many ways, it's quite easy to keep moving forward. It's like, and plus, as you've said, in this political climate right now, it could not matter more to do what you do on TikTok, to do what I'm doing here, to do what all the other people are doing. We have to speak up and fight this kind of ignorance. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that I also kind of hold on to a little bit is the fact that all the people who are pouring on the abuse, they're handing us the receipts of their behavior.
Exactly.
They're handing us. What is it? The evidence showing that, you know, this is how they treat people. Yeah. Because in the end, the argument of, hey, people who made this thousands of years ago aren't around to care, that can stick there, sure. But how about the fact that Joe Rogan, in front of millions of people, is haranguing you about your cancer?
Mm-hmm.
That
they show who they are.
They show who they are. And that is like, for a celebrity especially, you know, they complain about cancel culture and stuff, but it's like, well, you just did an irreprehensible thing.
Yeah.
If I were to say something negative about somebody's sickness or somebody's gender or somebody's religion or something at work, that is a trip to HR. That is a you get to get in trouble.
Oh yeah.
If you go, I mean,
if I said that kind of shit to my students or colleagues, I'd be like fucking fired immediately. Yeah.
You know, they're handing us the receipts showing that their behavior is crap. And the internet's forever. Everybody likes to say that. The internet's forever. So when they do come back and say, hey, I was like this all along, and you just say, hey, well, here's a tweet showing that you weren't. Here's a tweet showing your crap behavior. Here's a tweet showing that you support this and this and this. So you cannot get angry or upset when we point this out and say, hey, you have to account for this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's this one creator that I've started following on Instagram. He's this young kid. He goes toe to toe with MAGA people. And apparently at one time he was a very vocal little white boy racist. Okay. Well, he has the receipts of where he did it. He also has the receipts of where he figured it out and where he's doing his damnedest to fix it. And every single time somebody says, hey, you used to do this, he goes, I know. And he owns it, and he owns the trial of fixing it.
Yeah.
These other folk don't. I admire that about that kid more than anything else. It's like, I don't need to listen to your content. The fact that I know you're trying. Bravo. I'll buy you a beer when you're old enough, because I'm pretty sure he's like 18. It's this. Yeah. So we're trying, and they're pushing back because it is drama, and it makes them notable, and it makes them money and stuff like that. And that's the whole reason why some of these people are still doing stuff. I mean, Joe Rogan isn't.
He's not going away. No, not at all.
Yeah.
Graham Hancock's not going away. Jimmy Corsetti's not going away. They make a lot of money off of what they do.
Yeah. So, you know, we're playing damage control. We're doing what we can to say, actually, hey guys, here's what it is. And this is the radius of radiation. Yeah, the one thing might not be that big in the grand scheme of the world, but it's the trickle down and the all the way out. Accountability.
Look, it matters. We live in a world right now where there's all kinds of shit going on, and we are experts in this little thing, and this little thing is part and parcel of what is going on in the world around us with regards to all the politics, all the whatever. I saw somebody, I think it was Dina, said politics and archaeology is and has always been intertwined. I mean, in reality, it's not just archaeology, politics and science, politics and everything, entertainment have always been intertwined. There's no avoiding it.
And that's an acknowledgement all of us in the field has made.
Yeah.
Especially over the last 50 years. We are trying our damnedest to acknowledge our past, fix our past, and better not repeat the mistakes of Indiana Jones going and taking pretty things from the locals and breaking everything else. You know,
exactly.
We used to. I worked with guys in the Southwest who started in the 80s, and they'd pocket stuff, they'd take it home, they'd do whatever, and there was just like this not care. They'd take pictures of burials and all this stuff. Something like NAGPRA comes out and brings forth to the forefront of, hey, this is a serious deal, and then they have to change their behavior. Meanwhile, my generation, younger than them, is learning, oh, here's what people used to do, here's what we do now.
Yeah.
There's an acknowledgement there. It's acknowledgement of cultural respect. It's an acknowledgement.
And just like that kid improving what he does, we're trying to do the same thing as a field,
we're trying to do this, which is why we really don't do the political thing of saying, hey, these people weren't here or were here, where we don't go, hey, these things show that these people were lesser. And that's one of the biggest things when it comes to the pseudoscience is that there's always somebody.
Wait. I got your video on that. Everybody, put some questions in the chat. I'm going to play one last video from TikTok of ArchaeoWolf because he does an amazing job. And if you don't follow ArchaeoWolf on TikTok or Instagram, go do it right now because he is really, really quite awesome. I'll put the link in the chat in a second. Let me find this one. Here we go.
Not from this
this one.
world. 100%.
Why is it the first thing that Europeans do after they culturally appropriate ayahuasca as their vehicle to spiritual awakening is make some sort of decree about the ancient structures in Egypt belonging to either Atlantis, mother culture civilizations, or aliens? It's almost like they had a meeting or a group chat and they decided that these are the two avenues they're going to have their hallucinations and spiritual visions on. It's always aliens or some advanced civilization that's been lost to some cataclysm. And do we want to have the discussion about culturally appropriating an indigenous medicinal plant for, their own trips down the merry way, and then immediately using that culturally appropriated drug to dismiss the cultural achievements of other non-European peoples on the other side of the planet? And they're also spiritual, and it's all about opening your third eye and being more aware and more empathetic to the world. Yet they can't seem to be bothered to look at the people whose ancestors made these amazing things and bask in the amazingness and the glory of those civilizations, just as all of the archaeological evidence has shown. They can't have their own unique visions. It has to be scripted on one of those two topics, and they all seem to center on cultural erasure or alternative history, taking away credit from the people who actually did it and giving those achievements to somebody else. And this lady's not the first, believe me, but she's the most recent one I've been tagged in. But my best friend, he uses ayahuasca. It got him his TV show. I wonder if it was the ayahuasca that led Graham to so gleefully throw his celebrity backing into Doge hacking away at government programs. Seriously, Europeans using ayahuasca is the same as kitschy white people using white sage to cleanse their auras. Want to have these spiritual awakenings so bad, but what they need to awaken to first is the disrespect they're throwing towards indigenous cultures. And the poor Egyptians, who apparently didn't build anything in their entire country. No, it had to be the little gray aliens and their rock stacking fetish.
Yeah.
So, okay, people, post some more questions. We'll stick around for 5 minutes or so. And
I saw the question about my YouTube. Yes, I have YouTube. It's in the process of making stuff. I'm trying to. Again, I work for 40 hours a week. First. Yeah, I actually got to download the thing that takes the watermark off them because I posted one and they're like, oh, you can't because there's a watermark. And it's just like, it's my face. But whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, I'm on TikTok. I do my best.
Yeah, no, I think you do an amazing job. Without a doubt, it's not that easy when we have jobs doing other things to create this kind of content. People are like, oh my God, you should have better edited videos and such. And it's like, man, I don't have time. This is why I've moved to live streaming. It's a lot easier to have people on and just shoot the shit, drink a beer, etc. And then I upload it to Spotify afterwards, and this program generates some shorts for me. But it's just like, that's just, we have to do what we can to fill the internet with good archaeology.
We have to.
Yeah.
And it is hard to do because, it's not just, I mean, it's not just time. It's our mental health, There's a laundry list of stuff that doesn't even address this career field that I deal with all the time. And that does affect, hey, I don't want to make anything today. Hey, I've got too much stuff to do. And so this is a thing where we are trying really hard to do the work that we do and bring information to people that pushes back against the the very well funded and the whatever word I'm trying to look for. The ones who are supported by absolutely everything. Graham Hancock and them, who have the backing of producers and television and money and budgets and all of that stuff, and they can go out and do these things and have a bigger reach. People keep asking me about my TikToks. They're like, you only get like 1,000 views on your TikToks. That's a crime. Why not? I'm like, probably because I don't post every single day. There's a reason the algorithm works the way it does. And I mean, I'm trying, but at the same time, I'll stop moving at 1 a.m. from everything, and I don't want to make any content. It's like,
you have videos with hundreds of thousands of views. Ignore those people that say that one video doesn't work. Like this is a long-term game.
It is
how
a long-term
the internet
thing.
works.
And the person who was telling me that was not using it as a prod that I'm bad at this. They were genuinely wondering why I don't have more, because I'm good at it. And I was like, well, this is why. I go a week and a half without posting anything because the world is the world. So it's it's fun. It's also a lot to do, and it is a lot of research. History of Kaylee points that out. It's a lot of research, because I really don't want to fall into my own trap of saying, hey, this isn't true, and having somebody cite a source and go, actually it is. And the couple of times that I've done that, it's either been an omission on my part or I didn't see that article. And then I go, oh, okay. And then I, acknowledge it, because, hey, that's what you do.
Exactly. You learn as you go, and you admit it when you're wrong. Unlike Dan Richards, who published a video, his second most viewed video is about this. It says Egyptologists lie. And he mentioned how there's two different narratives for this one site. It turns out he confused two different articles. It was actually two different sites.
Well, of course.
and he's not retracted it. He's not taking it down, because it's still getting hundreds of thousands of views.
So
that's
still
how he
making
makes
him
money.
Still making him money. And he doesn't have to be, it gives him a justification to not be accountable. The question of what do I think, how do I, how the History Channel has ruined everything. Yeah, I remember when the History Channel actually had history.
Oh yeah,
I remember, because
me too.
That was like my first. I was living with my grandparents at the time. It was the first time I had access to cable, because I grew up poor and I didn't have cable. So it was 98, 99. I lived with my grandparents because I was going to high school in a different town, and my parents lived like 70 miles away. And watching the History Channel, they had Modern Marvels. They had, all of the documentaries about World War II. They had all this stuff that was actually good science. And yes, it's cut up in a format that people watch and are intrigued by and keeps their attention, because they are selling soap. But it was actual factual stuff, And then 2001, 2002, they seem to run out of how many times can you talk about the Battle of Midway. And they start getting into the, what if thing, which is ancient aliens, bringing up Eric von Däniken, it conveniently ignoring all of the stuff he's talked about and done, the cultural appropriation and everything. And that became such a sensation that lots of people watched it. And that's where you have Gregorio, hair guy, continue getting more and more and more hair, because it becomes, he's the personality now. And every single time they do a new season, it moves the goalpost, it postulates more stuff that's even crazier, and it's a self-building machine, because people are like, well, what's going to happen next? And again, they're presenting stuff that's entertaining. It's entertaining, but they're presenting it as a fact without actually addressing, here's this thing. And the problem is that some of the stuff that we talk about, yes, is kind of dry. It's the nature of it. But, and people have a short attention span. 7 seconds if you're in a museum.
Yeah, exactly.
Apparently spend 7 seconds reading a display, so you have to keep the description short. If it's not entertaining, people might go watch something else. They're not trying to educate you. They're trying to sell soap and Ford F-150s and Pop-Tarts.
That reminds me, we have a good question here for you.
Yep.
Do you think bringing a person like Dan Richards out to a dig site and showing what we do would open their eyes to what modern archaeology is about, or are they too closed-minded?
I think that if we did that, it might open their eyes a little bit, but not enough to step away from the money. You know, you can. I mean, it's the stick. It's their stick. They've got a process going. You know, either you could bring them out to doing something. Oh, great, that's fine, cool, awesome that you're doing this work. But if it's not going to benefit them in some way, they're probably not going to care that much.
In fact,
if
Dan
it was
offered,
profound,
yeah,
if it was a profound change, maybe. But taking him out to a Pueblo complex being excavated because they're putting a road through, I don't think he'd care.
Yeah, I don't think he'd care. And he was offered Renfrew and Bonn archaeology essentials, methods and theory and whatnot. He turned it down.
Yeah.
He'd rather keep making up lies than learn real archaeology as the reality of it.
Yep. Because
so, okay.
Money.
Yeah.
There is something that I do have a challenge for Mr. Hancock. I think it's because he's a Brit, and it's good tradition for the British of wealth and standing to, what is it? Finance expeditions to go find shit. He has the ability to support all this archaeological work in all of the places that we apparently don't look at, which I don't know how he knows where we don't look, to go find his evidence. So explain to me why he's at archaeological sites that have been studied for 50 years.
Yeah, I know. Seriously,
he was in the room with you when he said that. Yeah, and then moved the goalpost of, oh, it's not where we've looked. How do you know where we haven't?
Because he hasn't read any of the stuff anyway about where we look. So the
oil and gas. Did I send you the one on the oil and gas industry?
No, I did not. No. Send it to me after. So, what? I don't know what this means.
What were you told when you were a student that has stayed with you?
Okay, I read it.
As a thing. What was it? I want to make sure I get this worded correctly. You're not the only one to stand here. And I was at a field school that I wasn't actually part of the field school. I was an aide TA that came out, and it was historic stuff, so I know a lot of it and everything, and it was pretty blasé. But we had done like a field trip with everybody up on this ridge, and you're out looking over this massive open area. It's where Lewis and Clark walked through. It's where generations of indigenous people, the Salish and the Nez Perce, would come down through on their way to harvest bison and all of this stuff. And I'm standing there looking at this, and the only modern thing there is the highway. You can't really tell anything else. And my professor said to everybody, because I was standing like right next to her, it rang really loud in my ear, which was, you're not the only one to stand here, which means that there have been thousands of years of someone standing there seeing the same thing that I did and perceiving it probably the same way as this expansive, what is it next? And that stuck with me. Just, you're not the only one to stand here. So that was good.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that one. And I think it's a really important lesson as well. All right, I have 4 more comments and chats to get through. One was that I had on Vincent Lynch recently to talk about those fake dire wolves, and he has been relentlessly harassed, as have I, presumably, potentially by the company that has done it. It's tough to tell because it's anonymous, but I just want to say that this is what happens to scientists like us that speak up, is we do get harassed, as I hope we've seen, and not just archaeologists.
And
he's an evolutionary biologist, Evo Med, and and
that's part of the conspiracy.
Exactly. I want to thank Yasser for saying that I make Uno look like a weak man.
The card game?
Yeah, or maybe I'm not sure who Uno is. But
I don't know who Uno is.
Here's a good one for you before we end on a deep thought one. Are you secretly a Wild West gunslinger and a Viking at the same time?
Yes. No, I kid you not. There's my carry in the truck, and I carry essentially a Viking hand axe on my
There
back.
you go. There you go.
So yeah, I carry both tools when I'm by myself because I'm by myself like 90% of the time I'm in the field. So yeah, I do carry those things. So sure.
And then last question. This is a deep one. Why is pseudoscience so attractive? Is it laziness, anti-intellectualism? I'm sure we could do a whole video on this, but
We could do a whole video on this.
Give me your 30-second, 1-minute reply.
30 seconds. It appeals to people who feel outside.
Yeah. I think that's less than 30 seconds even.
It is easy to consume because it's on television. You don't have to go to school. You don't have, the people are talking to you and sharing secrets with you. It might appeal to certain people because they have a worldview that is rooted in racism, cultural erasure. They've got their upbringing, because of whatever. All of this their worldview, all the stuff that influences them and makes their decisions, they see something like this, and if it appeals to them and makes them feel seen, they follow it. Yeah. Because if I look at somebody who's picked up an arrowhead and I say, hey, you can't do that, here's why, and they say to me, well, why can you? And I go, well, because I'm a professional and I've done the work and I've done all this stuff. They go, oh, so you have to be special to do a thing. It's not special, it's trained. You have the ability to do it yourself. The acknowledgement is if you asked, if you wanted to participate, you could do. But it is easy. It makes them feel seen. It includes them.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so appealing. Meanwhile, we're standing here doing this for pretty much free. I don't get paid. Wanting to share and bring people in. If I could legally, due to concerns with work and the tribes and all this stuff, I would love to do tours and say, hey, here's the landscape we're in. This is what this is. This is why. And share with people on that. There's ways to go about that. There's your historic preservation associations. There's stuff through the state preservation offices. There's field schools that you can do. Any of these schools and academic institutions that are doing work, they will absolutely have a warm body show up. They don't care what your background is. You can carry a bucket or run a screen. And people can get involved in this. It just takes a little bit of footwork. And we want to share this information. We want to get it out there.
I'm with you 100%.
We want to share this. The problem
and I think somebody above said the best way to deal with this is to make what we do more accessible. I've lost the comment, but I completely agree.
I agree.
It's not about debunking. It's about sharing what we can do and say.
And I agree with that. There is roadblocks in front of that, of course, because Flint, you've written reports. I've written reports. They are dry. They're long. It takes a long way to get to the juicy parts. Lots of stuff is behind a paywall. Again, that requires that extra step of, hey, I can't afford this, but you reach out to the author, or you don't buy a coffee for a month and pay for a subscription. Doing these things, it's easy you can get to it. The biggest thing that we face as creators is the fact that the money is in the excite and the drama, which is the TV stuff. Time Team has been thrown out there a number of times of, hey, this is really good. I agree. Time Team is really good. Yes, it's cut up for television, but the fundamentals are there. Ancient Aliens isn't. But Ancient Aliens
Time Team is no longer on television. It's on YouTube and Patreon. It's all crowd supported.
Because it wasn't generating money.
Yeah.
And in the United States, I know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, I know that the BBC is government funded. You get a block of money for a TV show, and you have however long that money lasts to do a TV show. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't have to go in front of a committee. Meanwhile, here, you have to launch a pilot, and if the pilot gets good reviews, you get more money for another episode. And if that does good, so forth and so on. And you have to present it as exciting. Now, some people, like Joe threw out there, weak academic man, there is this idea that, academics don't actually go out and do anything, right? That Joe didn't invent that. And I told this to somebody who actually asked me if I want my own TV show. I was like, I could teach you guys archaeology that's actually real, because getting out of a truck, wearing my hat, the truck with a snorkel on it, wearing my hat, presenting this dashing hero kind of persona, saying, hey, we're going to do this. Like, it's jazz. That gets you. Yeah. And then, you know, I can walk through and explain stuff that's really boring, but you dress it up.
Of course.
And you have to appeal to the audience. And we doing this right, it takes time, it takes effort, and we do have to account for how other people are going to interpret our stuff. That goes back to our consultation with the tribes and everything like that. Meanwhile, the big TV shows, they don't care. You know, because somewhere in the credits they say it's entertainment only.
Yeah.
You know, that's their out.
I agree. That's their out. All right, that's our out too. Entertainment only. I want to thank you, everybody. Go check out Morgan on his YouTube and on his TikTok and his Instagram. And thank you all for showing up. Make sure to leave a like and a comment to feed the algorithm. And let's rock out.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming.
Of course.